In today's video, we're going to be going over the last few games and the problems that are arising for Enzo Maresca and his Chelsea side. Okay, let's start with the Manchester United game because we're going to go over a few of the problems that we've sort of seen in the Brentford, the Manchester United, and the most recent game against Lincoln. But the problems that are occurring are, some of them are the same and then some of them are slightly different. What we're going to speak about is a few of the shape issues, a few of the sub issues, which a lot of people have been sort of speaking about recently and frustrated about, but also just the squad and the overall sort of impact that the squad is having currently on the team and why it's affecting sort of the likes of Maresca and the team just in general. So we're going to start with the Manchester United game because I think this sort of instant that really impacted the game, of course, and led to the sort of the poor decisions which we're going to mention that Maresca did make in the end. It all comes from this poor moment, from compounding mistakes is how I call it. And something you're taught at academy level is, especially within a team, a mistake is fine. One mistake, the whole point of a mistake and the whole point of being a team is that if one man makes a mistake, somebody else accounts for it and helps you. What happens on this occasion is, for the first 5 minutes of this game, Chelsea could not weather the Amorim storm. They allowed the distances to get extremely large. Now, yes, this is from a goal kick situation, but if you watch the entire 5 minutes back before the red card, it's really uncontrollable. It's really scrappy, and Man U have exactly how they want it. They're winning the second balls, and they're keeping the ball alive in dangerous areas. Now, from the goal kick, this is exactly what we said pre-game that Manchester United are going to do. They're going to hook it into someone like Sesko, who's going to try to win that in behind and get in behind your defence with runners such as Mbermo. That's what they're trying to do. They're trying to make those little connections from direct plays. They're the most direct team in the league. What happens here is you compound mistakes. Chalobah, on his heels, doesn't get to the ball against Sesko quick enough. Yes, Sesko has the height advantage, but Chalobah, if he's ready, he can win that ball. He's aggressive enough to put Sesko off balance and at least make it hard for him to make that connection that he does. So that's the first error. Casado then doesn't get goal side and track Mbermo well enough, which is something that is probably one of his weakest attributes in terms of tracking runners off the shoulder. So he doesn't account and he compounds the mistake. Instead of making up for the mistake of Chalobah, it's a compounded mistake. That's now 2 errors, which sees Manchester United in acres of space to attack the goal. And then, of course, the third and final mistake, Sanchez comes out in no man's land and he fails to do anything of note and gets sent off. So you've got 3 mistakes, all compounded by one another, leading to an unfavourable position. Now, from here, of course, people will have their opinions on what happened with the substitutions. Now, I'm going to go through what I think sort of the game state and how it, sort of the timeline of these sort of decisions. So, Sanchez off for Jorgen. Well, Sanchez sent off. So, Jorgensen comes on for Esteval. That makes complete sense to me. That one sub makes complete sense. Now, in a 0-0 game state, and we've seen it against Newcastle in the 10 men, when we went down to 10 men, but we was actually 1-0 down. What we did in that game is we took off Madueke. If we go to here, we took off Madueke and we brought on Reece James. So we brought on a defensive player against Newcastle. And people will say against Newcastle, we had the better of the game. We could have got back into it and got a draw. We lost 2-0 in the end. But with 10 men, we played really well in the second half and we played well enough to get in the game. So what went well in that game and why is it? Because what I think people don't understand, and Maresca made errors, which is going to, and he's going to learn from those errors. He's a young coach. And as we say from players, they need to play in cup finals to experience cup finals and sort of learn from those situations. A red card that early in a game is so out of the ordinary that Maresca's barely had to coach those situations. So you can only look at the games where he has coached a situation similar. And it's not as similar because, yes, I think Jackson in this game is like 25 minutes in, where he's already 1-0 down. So it's a little bit different. But in order to learn from those situations, you have to be in them. And I think that the circumstance of this game is, that's why I wouldn't put as much pressure on the Maresca decisions, even though quite a few of them, in my opinion, were wrong. So in this Newcastle game that I went and back and watched, and I watched the whole game, and then I watched the second half again because I wanted to see the exact changes and how we sort of controlled the game and what Maresca's go-to strategy is at 10 men. And I think that the idea here was different, even though in different shapes. And I say different shapes, but it wasn't actually a different shape because what happened is Neto off the ball was dropping in as a wing back. You had Neto as a right wing back, Reece as a right centre back on the ball, and then of course you've got Colwill and you've got Chalobah, so you've got those three there. But then what you've also got, if we just do this, is you've got the you've got like a midfield diamond again, or a midfield box. And the idea of having that box is to control the game. You have three proper central midfielders, Caicedo, Lavia, Enzo, and then you've got Palmer, who is technically playing as a striker, but he'd drop in and sort of create that box. So that Chelsea could, even with 10 men, they could control the midfield, and they had enough in there to control the game because, again, these centre-backs had to step out with those pocket players if they dropped all the way in. So what this gave Chelsea is a foundation to build with. And I think the difference in this game compared to the game against Manchester United is we had the outlet of Neto running in behind. Of course, Palmer dropping in, very, very good. So what Palmer's doing is essentially what João Pedro did at the weekend against Manchester United. What we didn't then have is we didn't have Neto on the pitch. Instead, you had Reece James and Cucurella. So in this situation, it is Cucurella out wide. If we go here, Cucurella and Neto. In this game, against Manchester United, it was Cucurella and Reece James. So that is, in my opinion, the first really wrong decision, was taking off Neto. Because if you wanted to shift into a 5 as he did, you could have done this. You could have then, Palmer goes off, and you bring on Andre Santos as you do. Because again, I actually think, I'll just write Santos in here. I actually think the Santos sub is absolutely fine. Because like I say, it stabilises the midfield. It gives you a chance to control a bit more of the game. And it means that once that ball sort of drops out of here, you've got three players in the middle of the park to contest second balls because they're going to be looking to go against your three central defenders. As soon as that ball comes out into this space, you've got three players to contest the ball, three natural players in the centre of the pitch, especially Santos adding a little bit more sort of duality in the midfield in the same way that Lavia can when he's playing. You then have these players bombing forward, and you've got João Pedro doing what he did really well and sort of making things stick, having Santos and Enzo sort of run into those channels as well. And I think there would have been a lot more to play off of here. So the Neto sub was definitely the worst decision in the game for me, because I think he could have helped this game a lot. And James did well from this right wing back spot in terms of when he got to here, he could put balls into the box, but I don't think there's enough you need the athleticism and the pace to get away. And James obviously doesn't have as much of that now in the locker. So that was the biggest sort of mistake in the game for me. And in comparison to the Newcastle game, like I say, I think he was trying to stabilise. That's what I understand. Now, the halftime subs, what I'm going to say about this is when it was back to 10v10, I understand starting the game in this way as well. So let's sort of go to what actually happened, which was James, you had Adebayo on, sort of shifted over like this. Now, I understand staying with something like this, with the conditions of the pitch, with the conditions of the weather. I understand actually staying like this for 10 minutes. Again, would I have done so? Probably not. I probably would have brought on Garnacho for, let's say, not tossing because he just came on, so it'd probably be Fofana. Shift him over, have it like this, and I would have probably brought on Garnacho and had somebody else, or let's just say Garnacho or Gittins, so Gittins is here, and have somebody who's a bit more of an outlet so that you have two players to sort of push in behind and you still have this block to sort of stabilise the game. But the idea with bringing Tosin in and staying with that for the second half to begin with, like I say, I understand to a degree, because the idea with how the pitch was, can we get our foot on the ball? Can we actually get control of this game before we throw the attacking subs on? That's how I think he was seeing it. Also, Amorim had 5 subs in reserve. So we can see how they react, and then we can sort of counter our movement off of that. However, and that actually worked. We got 75% possession. We took control of the ball in the second half. But of course, time is against us. It's not against them. So I understand the urgency of it. But 10 minutes for me is fine to sort of settle into the second half before making those changes. The changes that followed that is an entirely different issue on its own. Because I would have brought on, yes, Gittins and Garnacho, the two obvious changes. But then against Lincoln last night, I think we've seen a lot of the reason as to why they're not as trusted. And it makes so much sense. And I said this, I had a segment on Sky Sports yesterday, I think, when you're watching this video, which, like, I'll flash up a picture now. Like, so grateful for anybody that sort of tunes into the videos and helps me out, because this is the exact thing that I'm trying to aim for, these opportunities. And without you guys, this wouldn't be possible. So thank you very much for all of this support, and please continue to do so, because it means the world to me. But I said that the trust issues with the likes of Gittins and the likes of Garnacho, they've just joined the club. And what you had with Madueke and Jackson, for example, are two players that had earned the trust of Maresca, finally earned that trust. And they were starting to develop. They'd had 2 years of development, and they were starting to sort of become big parts of that first team. Now what you have with these players is they're earning the trust of Maresca, and he's turned instead to Tyreek George, who he worked with last season and has a bit more trust with, and Malo Gusto. And both of these players he's worked with, he knows that they're going to work hard off the ball. He knows they're going to work hard running in beyond and being a runner for this team, being relentless, which was important at 2-0 down, because you need to work hard to sort of, especially with the conditions and how it was. And I think it's a trust thing. And I think it speaks a lot to the sort of directors and what we've done in terms of this window. And it's like I said, I'm a big fan, Jamie Gittins especially, I'm a huge fan of him. But he's so raw. And what I said before he'd even kicked a ball for Chelsea was, brilliant player, but he needs to be given time to develop. And what he's not going to be afforded to is have that time to develop, because instead of signing Xavi Simons, who would have probably been that starter, you've now got Gittins, who's developing. You've got Garnacho, who's still earning trust and somewhat developing as well. You've got Esteval, who is being forced to really take that next step, and he's so capable, so we're lucky in that sense. But it's such high pressure on his shoulders at 18 years old. You've got so many players now that need to take that step up quickly, otherwise Chelsea are going to be in trouble, and they need to earn that respect of Maresca and that trust of Maresca extremely quickly. And that is a worry for me. So that's sort of my timeline of the Manchester United game. I think I've sort of mentioned everything that I wanted to speak about in terms of that game. Leave any questions you've got on that game, because we're going to touch on the Lincoln game now, and sort of with that we're going to touch on the Brentford game, because I think a few of the issues, we've touched on the subs and sort of those changes, we've touched on the red card reaction, and I think we've touched on sort of the squad trust. But the last thing I want to touch on is a little bit more of a tactical thing, and it is how teams are now pressing us in this sort of 5-4-1. And we didn't get to see it against Manchester United, so we may have even seen it against them, and it may really become a trend. But against Brentford and now against Lincoln, we've seen this trend of playing in this 5-4-1. And again, like we've seen it a few times before as well. The striker is coming and sitting on the number 6. So what we've got here, and what was a problem in the first half, is with that sort of back, you've got your 3 along the back. You've got Chalobah just outside here. And then you've got Gusto's pushing up into the pocket. So you've essentially got sort of this. You've got your diamond here and your 3 at the back. What they're doing is they're pressing with the striker on the 6. Then they've got the number 8 who can make the runs beyond to press the centre-backs, but they don't have to do it. They're in here ready to sort of press if the moment comes, if that ball comes back and they can force the ball. So say it goes into the corner where they can trap the pitch. When this ball goes in to here, what they can easily do then is they can trap that ball, because you've got Santos is covered, he's covered. And they can easily trap the ball in the sideline. And this is something that hurt us against Bayern Munich? I think we were getting trapped quite a lot as well. And teams are being able to press us in this manner quite easily now, because you've got that striker dropping onto the number 6, which is, when you have one in the pivot, very easy to do. The spacing here is so sort of suboptimal, because even if Santos receives this ball here, his only option is to really go back, unless he turns out himself, because Gusto is moving away. Buonanotte and Enzo are sort of marked quite easily here. And again, you've got one pushing out wide. You've got Buonanotte sort of away from the play and sort of out the play. And Santos, his perception of receiving the ball is going to be this way. And it actually leads to where the space was in this first half was Trevor Chalobah, because Gusto, pushing up to here, was dragging this man sort of away. And the number 8s were sort of like, again, they were pressing from a central area onto the centre-backs. So where the space was, when you got the ball over here, was Trevor Chalobah, who had this sort of area here behind Gusto to step up with the ball. And even when we realise that, we see it for the goal, Enzo Fernandez looks to make that clipped pass over, which is really poorly executed, really poorly sort of. It was poor from Fernandes. He didn't sort of take in. He knew where the space was, and I think that's why he did it. But it's putting him under pressure, and it's really poor from Chalobah as well because he should get there. But that's where the space was because Gusto was taking that man away, and they were looking to press and trap you in the corner. So they understood where the space was, but the execution was poor and it was lazy. In the second half, what Maresca did, and this is similar against Brentford, what Maresca did, is he makes the adjustment to go with 2 in the pivot. So he sends Hato forward, and we go into the 2-2-5-1 essentially. So you've got the 2 centre backs here. Hato pushes up alongside Santos, and then what you've also got is these 2 sort of pocket players on the diamond. They're stretching out now, and they're being closer. So now what you've got is essentially you've got your 4-2 in what sort of a stretched back 4-4-2, 4, and then a 2. And what this allows for is tighter spacing. If Santos or one of these players receives the ball in the middle of the park, you've got much better access to sort of pop it inside. If this comes into one of the wingers or like the wide central midfielders, they can either look to connect in here, they can look to sort of bounce a pass inside, so they could sort of look to bounce that pass here or here. You've got 2 players now who are running in there. I know it's a lot of arrows, but the idea is the connectivity now is so much better. And the best thing is, what you've got is, you've still got Santos being marked by the striker. But the number 8, the seed of doubt is now placed in the number 8, because where he was now looking to press Fofana and really be aggressive on Fofana and cut those angles off because they knew they had Santos pinned, what we've now got with Hato's positioning is he's already looking and he doesn't want to go because he knows Hato, if that ball can come into him in whatever way, a third man combination, like into here, look at the acres of space Hato then has to sort of tread forwards. And it was much easier for Chelsea to find that spare man with these 2 sort of in closer proximity and these 2 split, so that it sort of distorted the 5-4-1 pressing shape. And it worked against Brentford as well. Now, a lot of people will say, so why doesn't Maresca just start with this? And the thing is with this is because it's risky because you're starting both of your fullbacks in advanced positions, right? You've got 2 fullbacks in advanced positions. So what you need in this sense is to know that they're going to be pressing with the 1 striker, because if they press with 2 and they have a 2v2 on your back line, if they win that ball, there's huge space that can be exploited down the middle. But also then if they step in, there's huge spaces to be exploited down the wings. So you need to be sure on what they're pressing with. So it is much easier to start with the 3 at the back, because it's more often that you'll get pressed with either 2 or 3 in the front line. So a 5-2-3 or a 5-3-2. And then if they do take the passive, and I passive in quotation marks, approach of playing in a 5-4-1, then you can sort of make the shift to go into that sort of advance both your fullbacks into different areas on the pitch to split their pressing scheme apart. That's much easier tweak to make in game, or at least at half time, where you can sort of see those gaps. And it worked on both occasions. So people saying that he should make that change quicker, I'm not so sure I fully agree with. Like, it depends how in tune the players are. I think if you had Cucurella and Reece James on the pitch instead of sort of Hato, and of course Gusto, but I think he's quite familiar in it as well, then I think you can make that change a little bit quicker because they're sort of really attuned with the system and they probably know to go into that 2-2-5-1 what it takes. Whereas I think with someone like Hato, you need to tweak those things at half time, and even with Andre Santos, right? Because the understanding of the new sort of the difference and the system switch, I think it's something that eventually you want your team to be able to transform without the half time. You want them to be able to go into a different system at 25 minutes if the pressing scheme's changed. You want that to be a thing. But I do think that takes a lot of team synergy, and we're very young, we're very inexperienced. And there's a lot of new players to sort of bed into that. So that was something I just wanted to touch on in terms of that pressing scheme. I think it's going to be on Maresca to sort of figure something out in that sense with the 5-4-1 press. And I think what we know is that the 2-2-5-1 is working well. So that is one thing that he's sort of got down. But can he start games in a different way to figure out that pressing scheme? That's probably the next question for Maresca, and that's something I'm intrigued to see. Let me know any questions that you do have, because I think we've touched on everything I wanted to touch on. I think the last thing just to mention as we end out the video, the inexperience and the mistakes that this team is making is not helping anyone. Like I say, the compounded mistakes in the Manchester United game, the error against Brentford, The fact that nobody is coming out to clear that ball. Yes, it was offside, but somebody has to put their head on that ball. Against Manchester United, the second goal, again, just allowed to hang in the air for ages before somebody even comes and puts a claim on it. Against Bayern, big mistakes, losing the ball and allowing them easy goals, which put us out of the game. And against Lincoln, Enzo Fernandez switched, Chalobah not switched on, and again, we put ourselves in trouble. Mistakes are always going to hurt you and make a game 10 times harder for you to win. So that's something that needs to be cut out. And we can always talk about that. We can always talk about the inexperience and the sort of fragility that is coming from that. So that's just what I wanted to end this video on. Any questions, please do let me know, because there's quite a lot that we've touched on in today's video. Tomorrow, we'll have the Brighton preview. So literally, as soon as I finish this video now, I'm about to go watch about 5 games of Brighton over the next sort of 24 to 48 hours. So yeah, let me know what you want to see from that as well, like what you're intrigued in for the Brighton preview. All your questions from this video, we'll get to them. Thank you for all the support. As I said, the Sky Sports segment, really, really happy with it. Please do like, comment, and subscribe, all that good stuff. Apparently, there's this new thing called Hype. So if you want to do that as well, that would massively help me out. I have no idea what it is, but if you want to help me out, why not smash the Hype or however this works? I'll have a look into it and see what it's about. Thank you guys all for the support. Up the Chelsea. Hopefully we can get a big win against Brighton and get back on track. See you guys in the next one.